Some huge results at the top and bottom of the FAWNL this past weekend, and there are plenty more significant fixtures to come. Yes, welcome along to this week's Women's Football Chat. My name is Chris Gadsby. I'm here every Thursday at 6 p.m, bringing you the very latest from the third and fourth tiers of women's football here in England. This is the show that is dedicated to the FAWNL, and my word, did we have some significant results across the divisions over the past week, and some really important games are on the horizon as well. Whose title challenge is going to fall off a cliff, and who's going to drag themselves out of the bottom two and survive in their division for another season. Still only just past the halfway point, of course, in the FAWNL this year, but we do have so many more stories to tell between now and May. First piece of news then is that we have had, we'll get onto it in a few moments. We had the Cup and Plate quarterfinals. We then had the semi-final draw, which was supposed to be, and maybe it was just me, but it was supposed to be live on Instagram. Never came live on Instagram for me, and then all of a sudden the draw just appeared on Twitter again. The one thing that I do kind of have a bit of a quibble about it, really, I suppose, is that the cup draw came out, semi-final. So only 4 teams to draw, and then underneath it says, the plate, the reserve cup and the reserve plate will be announced tomorrow, and that just, it didn't sit too well with me, and it didn't seem to sit too well with many other people on Twitter as well. If it was the kind of the first round and the draw had taken 20 minutes, you kind of could understand it to a point, although I would still put them both out together. But to have it in the semi-final stage where the plate just seems like a secondary competition just didn't really seem right to me. So that's come out. So we do have, obviously, those to go through as well. So let's have a look at those first. We'll start with the FAWNL Cup quarterfinals. Still regionalised at this point, although it has now gone nationalised in the semi-final stage. So in the northern half then of the draw, AFC Fylde 1, Newcastle United 4. Now, Fylde had actually taken the lead in this game through Sasha Rowe in the 22nd minute. Unusual position for Newcastle to be in, finding themselves behind, but that lead only lasted for a couple of minutes before Georgia Gibson levelled for Newcastle. Then in the second half, they really just turned it on. Tyler Dodds, 50th and 63rd minute, Georgia Gibson in the 70th minute as well. So Newcastle showing why they are at the top of the table. They also announced this week 2 new signings from Crystal Palace, so they've been able to drag players from the south to relocate up towards Newcastle and play for them as well, so throwing what seemingly is a lot of money at getting into the Championship this season, although things haven't entirely gone to plan for them over the last couple of weeks. Halifax 3, Huddersfield 2, the other tie in the northern half of the draw. This one, bit of a back and forth affair, really. Freya Walton in the 23rd minute had put Huddersfield in front. Lucy Sowerby equalised then 6 minutes later, and it's 1-1. Yasmin Mason then puts Huddersfield back in front just before half time. Halifax then equalised on the hour mark through Ellie White. And then Halifax, for the first time in the game, with 15 minutes to go from the penalty spot, Brittany Sanderson putting them in front. So they go through to the semi-final. It was always going to be interesting to see which one of those two sides, who are down towards the bottom of the Northern Premier Division table, would be the ones to get into the semi-final of the Cup. It is Halifax. Then into the southern half, hashtag United 3, London Bees 1. Again, rather unusually in this one. London Bees taking the lead in this game. Hashtag United, particularly in recent weeks, tend to score in the first 5 minutes or so and give themselves a foothold in the game. But Abby Benstead for London Bees in the 15th minute put them in front. That excuse me, that only lasted 9 minutes before Grace Gillard equalised in the 24th minute. Then a goal for Victoria Franck on the hour mark, and then Malika Opinda-Gill in the 89th minute. So perhaps not as comfortable for hashtag United as we might have expected, but a 3-1 victory puts them in the semi-final nonetheless. And then extra time was needed between Ipswich Town and Portsmouth, but it is the side at the top of the Southern Premier Division who make it into the semi-finals. This one, it was an opening goal for Sophie Quirk just before the half-hour mark. Bonnie Horwood, 9 minutes later in the 38th minute, equalising for Ipswich. That was it at the end of normal time. But then Nicole Barrett in just the 4th minute of extra time put Portsmouth back in front, and they were able to hold on to it for the game and get through to the semi-finals. So semi-final draw, and these are to be played. It is already on the whiteboard on the 25th of February, so in 3 weeks' time. We've got Portsmouth making the long trip up to Newcastle, and hashtag United travel to Halifax. So now we're at the stage, semi-finals. We've got the top 2 in the south, and then top of the north plus I think it's 9th in the Northern Premier Division. There in the FAWNL Cup semi-finals. Let's now have a look at the plate semi-finals. A great game between Barnsley and Hull. Two sides going well in Division 1 North, and they needed a penalty shootout to decide the winner of this one. Hull taking the lead early on through Ellie Tanser, but that lasted all of 2 minutes before Abby Housecroft equalised for Barnsley. And then in the same minute, Liberty Bott also scored for Hull City. So 2 goals there in the 12th minute. Then Emily Pierpont in the 48th minute equalised again for Barnsley. They then take the lead through Charlotte Stewart in the 78th minute before then Hull equalise again through Shakala Brooks in the 84th minute. She came off the substitute bench. Then they went through all of extra time, no further goals. Barnsley winning by 4 goals to 2 on penalties. Exeter City, perfect record of course in Division 1 South West, beating Southern Premier Division side Billericay Town by 2 goals to 0. Both goals coming in the final 15 minutes. Sarah Stacey in the 76th minute and Beth Ireland in the 79th minute with the goals there for Exeter City. So they get themselves into the semi-final. Maidenhead United, they lose by 1 goal to 0 to Cambridge United. Alicia Stocktoe down in the 68th minute with what would prove to be the only goal of the game. And Derby County beating Sutton Coldfield Town by 5 goals to 0. Not really too much of a surprise this one, but a hat-trick for Amy Sims, 9th, 21st and 40th minute. Also one for Rebecca May in the 80th and Kira Ray in the 92nd minute. These semi-finals then, so Barnsley, Exeter, Cambridge United and Derby, they are also played on the 25th, which if you want to particularly zoom in on the board, is the final column as it stands at the moment, and it's the ties are Exeter City against Derby and Barnsley against Cambridge United. So again, in a few weeks' time, we'll be looking at those semi-finals. Now we have those semi-finals as well. The other bit of news, it has brought about a slight bit of concern on social media in the first when it first happened, is that all of the Northern Premier Division games disappeared off full time. and there was a bit concerned that they were all going to get jumbled round and everything was going to change. They then came back the following day. Nothing has moved that was already in the system, at least not over the next kind of 6-7 weeks, which as far as my whiteboard goes, that I haven't had to change anything. Apparently a couple of fixtures towards the real back end of the season, they've changed. But what has happened is essentially the league have gone through and filled in as many of the gaps as they possibly could. For all of the teams, this is not just the Northern Premier Division. I then went through the rest and they filled in as many gaps as they could. And essentially, by the time we reach the middle of March, if all goes to plan, everyone will have played 18 games in the league. There's the odd team that have only played 17, but essentially 18 games played in the league. And what that means is that then over the next 6 weeks, teams only need to play 4 or 5 games. We hopefully shouldn't be in a situation where teams are having to play Sunday, Tuesday, Sunday, Tuesday, Sunday, Tuesday just to get the games in, which I think happened to Leeds last season. And what it also avoids is, as we get into the run-in and we get into the really interesting stories towards the back end of the season, we don't have some teams that have got 2 games to play and some teams that have got 5 trying to catch them up. So it should make for a great end of the season. So hopefully the weather, we've got past the worst of it, hopefully. Don't really have postponements, too many at least, between now and the end of the season. If we do have postponements, we now have spare weeks in which to get those games on, which is also a bonus, means we should be able to finish on the 5th of May. And generally, that should give us a great final day. Maybe some titles will be decided, maybe relegations will be decided, or maybe everything will be done by then and nothing will matter. Who knows? Right, so those are the Cup and Plate games. Let's get down to the Northern Premier Division. Big results in the Northern Premier Division, and it follows up from the previous week, really, where I said that, particularly I said it in my Christmas articles as well, and I said it a couple of weeks ago, that January would define Nottingham Forest's season. They last week went away to Newcastle, won by 2-1. This week they're at home to Burnley and win by 2-1. Alice Keatley in the 57th minute put Forest in front. May Moncaster then doubled the advantage in the 94th minute. Ginny Lackey did get one back for Burnley in the 98th, but she scored the goal. I was watching it live on YouTube. Scored the goal, Forest then kicked off, and about 10 seconds later that was it. There wasn't really time for Burnley, but that's a couple of really big results for Forest, as we'll see when we get onto the table in a moment. And the only other game in the Northern Premier Division, Wolves against Stoke. Wolves, apparently, according to Nick of the Wolves Women podcast, absolutely battered Stoke, but the result doesn't lie. 1-1. Lily Murphy in the 43rd minute put Stoke in front, and it took a 90+5 equaliser from Eloise Wilson to rescue a point for Wolves in this game. So that is a real big 2 points dropped for Wolves. What that means for the table is there's only been one move, which is Forest going above Burnley because they played each other. Wolves remain in 5th and Stoke remain in 8th. So not a huge amount in the Northern Premier Division with only 2 games going on to talk about. However, you have to look at the top of the table there. You've got Newcastle played 12 on 31, Forest played 12 on 27, Burnley played 11 on 26. Let's say Burnley win the game in hand, that's 29. You've got the top 3 teams, and I do feel as though it's a 3-horse race now. Wolves, yes, they've got 2 in hand, but 2 in hand only takes them to 23. That would be 8 points away from Newcastle. You're relying on them dropping points. You're relying on the other teams dropping points. And you've got to beat Newcastle twice, which Wolves have still got to play Newcastle twice. So For me, just feel like Wolves are too far back now. For me, it's a three-horse race. Newcastle, Forest, Burnley. The advantage Forest have got is they've now played Newcastle and Burnley twice each. Newcastle and Burnley have got to play each other. In fact, that's this weekend. We'll come on to that towards the back end of the show. As I said, Newcastle have got Wolves to play twice. I'm pretty sure Burnley have got to play Wolves as well. So it's a really big couple of weeks for the rest of those teams. And Forest have really, from being almost on the cusp of being ruled out, have dragged themselves back into this title challenge. As I said, down towards the bottom, Stoke, an extra point for them. They're now 8 clear of the relegation zone. May well be enough for them. We'll have to see on that. See, Fylde, Huddersfield and Halifax, they were all in the cup, so they didn't play at all. West Brom didn't play either, so there's not a huge amount to talk about in the Northern Premier Division. All of the action was at the top, and it really has closed that up. It did look for a time like Newcastle were going to run away with the league. Burnley were kind of staying hot on their tails, but Forest have really dragged themselves into that conversation. Southern Premier Division then, just 2 games to talk about here. Milton Keynes Dons 1, Cheltenham Town 0 and Plymouth Argyle 0, Oxford United 4. MK Dons then, only goal of the game coming late on. Zoe Creaney in the 83rd minute, capitalising on a mistake from the Cheltenham keeper, gave them a 1-0 win. And Plymouth Argyle 0, Oxford United 4, a hat-trick for Zoe Barrett, who just can't seem to stop scoring at the moment. 10th, 37th and 48th minute. Isabel Cook in the 15th minute as well, with the goals for Oxford. So a 4-0 victory for them. They started to turn their season around somewhat after a bit of a dodgy start. It means that Oxford are now up to 4th in the Southern Premier Division table. They are still 8 points away from Portsmouth and with a vastly inferior goal difference, so let's call it 9. But really for Oxford, they are turning their season, which looked as though it might be one where they really struggled, into one that is certainly turning into a respectable one, particularly when you consider, yes, they are 8 points behind #United, but they've got 2 games in hand. They could win both of those and close up on #United. Ipswich Town down to 5th. That's obviously they didn't play. They were in the cup as well. MK Dons with their victory, they really do start to split the field now with that victory over Cheltenham. They're 6 points clear of Cheltenham, so it's very much a top half, bottom half situation now. Plymouth Argyle, they're now level on games played with Chatham and London Bees, but they don't pull away any further from the relegation zone. However, they are still 8 points clear of the relegation zone and only 9 games to play. So this is where, again, when I mentioned earlier about the fixtures, you look at #United, you look at Cheltenham Town. Rather than carrying on playing games at the same rate and then having a month's gap between like game 20 and game 21, which we saw a couple of times last year, what they've done with the fixtures this year is they're almost getting them to play every other week rather than every week, and therefore their fixtures kind of slow down. Everybody else gets the chance to catch up, and then everyone kind of goes in at the middle of March on 18 games played each. Now, you've therefore got the 2 ways of looking at that. You've got the, oh great, we've got points on the board, they're banked. The other way is, do you lose a little bit of rhythm? You've got to try and find friendlies if you want to keep the matches going, etc. So there are 2 sides and 2 ways of looking at that. It's something that you're never going to get away from, being an amateur football league on pitches that don't have undersoil heating, don't have great ground staff. If it rains a bit, you might end up with it being off. You can't get around that. There's nothing you can do about it. But that's the Southern Premier Division table. Let's now look at Division 1 Midlands. We were denied the top of the table clash between Loughborough Lightning and Boldmere St Michael's. Now, this is because Boldmere St Michael's couldn't field a side. That is according to Loughborough. Now, a lot has come out from Boldmere St Michael's over the course of the last couple of weeks. Now, this is all just reporting from Twitter, and essentially this is from the Nicky Miles on Twitter. It says that a board member of Boldmere has sacked all of the staff because he doesn't give a if you win the league. The women's section is just noise. All staff were then sacked because they compiled an email to point out issues surrounding the women's section. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Boldmere St Michael's. If they've got no staff at all, then are they going to just completely drop off? There is more to that kind of Twitter thread. You can go and search it out yourself. But Boldmere, who looked for all the world as though they were going to push Loughborough all the way this season. They're only 2 points behind them with 10 games to go. This was going to be a huge top of the table clash. And it got postponed. We don't know if it's going to get played again, when it's going to get played again. Are Boldmere now not going to be able to finish the season? Do they now not have a women's section? Which would be devastating if that was to happen and all of the results became voided. I don't know what the table would look like if those results got voided. Off the top of my head, because Boldmere, of course, they've got 27 points out of 36. There aren't many teams that would lose out from having a result against Boldmere. Peterborough beat them. Northampton beat them. And Leafield Athletic beat Boldmere St Michael's as well on the opening day of the season. That would really hurt Leafield Athletic to go from 6 points down to 3 when nobody else would drop 3 points. If that was to happen, would really, really hurt Leafield Athletic. So they will be praying that something gets sorted, because as it is for Leafield, they're only 1 win away from safety. And if that suddenly became 2, then that would be devastating for Leafield. But other results and other games did go ahead, and a huge one also towards the top. This was third against fourth. Peterborough United 0, Sporting Cowser 5. Goals in this one. You see, only 4 of them actually have been put on full time. Goals in this, unless there was an own goal or something. No, it just doesn't say. Perfect. So we've got Megan Cannon in the 26th minute, Daisy Wickett 35th and 52nd minute, Isabel Austin Short in the 45th plus 3rd minute. There are 2 footballs against her name, but only just 1 time. So whether she scored 2 in stoppage time. No, she didn't, because it was 3-0 at half time. There's a mystery goal there somewhere. The joys of trying to cover amateur football. But a huge result for Sporting Cowser there. League Town 1, Leafield Athletic 1. An important point for Leafield Athletic, who took the lead in this one through Maisie McDonnell in the 27th minute. Katie Meyer equalising for League Town in the 55th minute. And a 0-0 draw between Solihull Moors and Sheffield. Still an important point for Sheffield. A very bad week for Notts County, despite the fact they didn't even play. So what does that mean for the table then? Well, Loughborough and Boldmere, they didn't play, so they stay as they are. Sporting Cowser now, though, up to 3rd and just 4 points behind Loughborough at the top of the table. Sporting Cowser also have a better goal difference, and they've got a game in hand. So Sporting Cowser potentially a net 1 point off the top of the table. With these, with a better goal difference and with 10 games to play, 11 games to play for Sporting Cowser. So Peterborough dropped to 4th after being thrashed by their rivals towards the top. Although Peterborough, no, only 5 points off the top as it is, still very much still in this conversation. Leek Town towards the bottom, then they get another point to pull themselves, I would say, further away from the relegation zone. But with Sheffield's point with Solihull Moors, that gap remains the same at 5. Notts County now, though, just 1 point above the relegation zone, and Sheffield have a game in hand and a better goal difference. So they're very much looking over the shoulder now on Notts County. Another point, as I said, there for Leek Town, Sheffield and Leafield Athletic, all drawing means they all just move up 1 in the points column and just edge a bit closer to Notts County. Right, Division 1 North. Still plenty to go through today, and a huge game towards the bottom of Division 1 North, where Chester Street Town were superior over FC United of Manchester by 2-0. Goals in this one: Laura Hockaday in the 10th minute, Rhiannon Gray in the 71st. Big 3 points for Chester Street Town, as we'll see with the table in a moment. Chorley 1, Doncaster Rovers Bells 4. Goals in this one coming to Doncaster Rovers Bells. There aren't any goals on full time. I had to go searching through Twitter for these. So Phoebe Snedden in the 19th minute. They didn't say, it was Jessica Tugby-Andrew, if I remember correctly, in the 22nd minute. And then 2 for Jasmine Saxton, 62nd and 74th minute. Charlotte Tyers with the only goal for Chorley, 6 minutes before half time. And a narrow victory, but a victory nonetheless for Stockport County. 13th minute, Emily Bradshaw with a goal away at York City. That would prove to be the only goal of the game. So Stockport County with the 3 points in that one. So what does that mean for the table? Not a huge amount. Obviously, Barnsley, Middlesbrough, Hull and Durham all not playing. Stockport County have pulled themselves level with Durham on 22 points, but they have played 2 games more, and they've played 3 games more than the teams they are trying to catch, and they're still 6 points behind. Doncaster Rovers Bells with their victory over Chorley. I've just noticed I've forgotten to swap their 2 logos round. I do apologise for that. So Doncaster Rovers Bells then in 7th on 14, Chorley in 8th on 12. And York City still in 10th after that defeat to Stockport County. Chester Street Town, though, now just a point away from safety after victory over FC United of Manchester. A win away for FC United of Manchester would have lifted them. Well, they'd have stayed 11th, but they'd have only been in the relegation zone on goal difference. As it is, they're now bottom of the table. But still, the 2 sides that came up last season struggling at the moment haven't swapped the Chester Street Town or Manchester logos over either. I have to do, when I do the tables every single week, I have to do it in 4 stages, and it appears I evidently missed that stage out this time. So apologies for that. Yeah, so there's the situation in Division 1 North. Division 1 South East, then relatively low scoring, despite the fact there were 5 games in Division 1 South East this weekend. But Worthing, another really good victory for them, and away from home. Gemma Worsfold in the 36th minute, Shannon Albury in the 37th minute with the 2 goals for Worthing. Ashford Town 1, London Seaward 1. No idea on the time of Shamoy Campbell's goal for London Seaward. It's not on full time. It's not on either of the team's Twitter accounts either. Anya Kinane with the goal in the 80th minute for Ashford Town. Chesham United, another really important weekend for them. They had conceded an own goal in the 35th minute to put Haywards Heath Town 1-0 up, but they fought back in the final 15. Gemma Fraser, 75th minute, Danielle Puddlefoot in the 88th minute from the penalty spot. Then Chesham United beat Haywards Heath Town by 2-1. Big result for Norwich City, beating Actonians by 5-1. Actonians' goal was scored in the 52nd minute, but I don't know who by. It's not on either Twitter. Actonians haven't put their lineup on full time yet. They should have done that 3 days ago. So they scored in the 52nd minute. But Norwich City, goals for Ellie Smith in the 29th, Natasha Snelling in the 50th, the 56th, and the 78th minute. One from the penalty spot for Hope Strauss in the 73rd minute. Convincing victory for Norwich City. And Queen's Park Rangers beating Cambridge City by 2-1. Don't know again the times on these goals, but Rebecca Stevenson for Cambridge City and Emily Hill and Courtney Ward Chambers for Queen's Park Rangers. What then that means for the Division 1 South East table? Nobody has moved at all in the Division 1 South East table. However, Worthing now within 2 points of Wimbledon at the top of the table. And what is more impressive with that, when you look at Worthing, obviously it's their first season in Division 1 South East after getting promoted last year, but also Worthing have played 9 of their 11 away games this season. So they've only got 2 more away games and 6 more home games. They are in a really, really strong position. Worthing have basically been on the road all year and now are in a position where they've come through those games. They've won a lot of those games away from home, and now they are able to hopefully make it capitalise at home as well. They've won 7, lost only 2. And they're in a very strong position. You compare it to Wimbledon, who have done 7 at home, 6 away. They're kind of much more even. So it might well be that Worthing, if they can make their home advantage count, will put on a big charge towards the back end of the season. Norwich City then remain in 3rd after their victory. Worthing, of course, win as well. Norwich with 2 games in hand over Worthing, 1 game in hand over Wimbledon, so they are still kind of the front runners at the moment, although they do obviously need to win those games in hand. Queen's Park Rangers with a victory as well. They stay in 4th, Ashford Town drawing with London Seawood, so they remain in 5th and 8th. Towards the bottom then, there's no movers, but it is a very different picture to the one it was a couple of weeks ago. Chesham United in particular, 2 really important wins for Chesham United. Firstly against Cambridge City, then against Haywards Heath Town. They've pulled themselves in the last couple of weeks from only outside the relegation zone on goal difference to now 6 points clear of the relegation zone. They are now 2 wins clear and with a better goal difference. So you're talking 2 wins and a draw, picking up results in 3 games, and they have to be wins as well in order for Chesham to get dragged back into that. Now, Cambridge City, they've only got 8 games left to play. They've picked up points in 4 games so far this season, but only 1 win. And you look at who Cambridge have got left to play. I know we're starting to look at run-ins already, but they've got Norwich away from home. They're in 3rd. They've got Wimbledon, who are currently top of the table. They've got Worthing as well, so they've got to play the top 3 already. Then they've also got Ashford, who are in 5th. Cambridge United, who are in 6th. There is 1 game against Haywards Heath Town coming up in mid-March and 1 against AFC Sudbury. But obviously, both of those sides, Haywards Heath and Cambridge, and then Sudbury and Cambridge, can't both win those games. And you look at where else these teams are going to get the points from. That's the situation for Cambridge with only 8 games to play. Haywards Heath Town, they've got Norwich, Worthing, Wimbledon, Actonians. They've got all these teams, not Actonians, Ashford. They've got all these teams towards the top of the table as well. So you start to look at how big those 6 points could be for the likes of Chesham, because 12 points could be enough this season. Those 2 weeks that they've just had, the 8 days that Chesham United have just had, could be enough to secure them in South East for another season. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens over the course of the next few weeks, because as those games get less and less, it starts to become more and more important to be picking up wins, and they might just look back at that week and see that that is what defined their season. Right, finally then, for results. Division 1 South West. Abingdon United 1, Bridgewater United 0. Ligo Jackson in the 55th minute with the only goal of the game for Abingdon United. Keynsham Town 3, Torquay United 1. Goals in this one. Naomi Clipston in the first minute with goal for Keynsham. Really set the tone, that one. Then Hannah Price in the 24th minute and Vicky Vipond in the 37th minute. Lexi Watts getting one back for Torquay in the second half on the 64th minute. But it was 3-1 in the end to Keynsham. Another good 3 points for them. Portishead Town 1, Moneyfields 1. Now Moneyfields, this is one where they're going to really feel as though they lost 3 points. They took the lead in the 25th minute. Kairino Aya Taylor with the opening goal for Moneyfields. But then in the 93rd minute, Chelsea Heel equalised for Portishead Town, and it really was a case of 2 points dropped rather than a point gained for Moneyfields. And then finally in Division 1 South West, and finally for the results on this week's Women's Football Chat, a goal for Georgia Van Dries in the 57th minute meant Swindon Town beat Southampton Women by a 1-0. What does that mean for the table then? Well, Exeter City and Bournemouth, they didn't play. They remain perfect at the top of the table. But for how much longer? Well, 3 days. Swindon Town are in third. They won again, but they are still 13 points away from Exeter, and they've played a game more. Abingdon are in fourth. They are above Moneyfields now after Abingdon's victory and Moneyfields' draw. So Moneyfields dropped down to fifth. Keynsham Town remain in sixth. Portishead Town, though, that point takes them above Maidenhead United. So Portishead Town in eighth, Maidenhead United in ninth. Southampton Women still down in 10th with just 5 points for the season. They have only played 9 games, but there are plenty of other teams now in South West who have only played 10 or 11. Torquay United, after their defeat, remain in 11th. Chelsea didn't play, so they remain at the bottom of the table. Of course, Division 1 South West, it's the 2-horse race at the top between Exeter and Bournemouth to see who's going to end up in the Southern Premier Division next season. With the best will in the world, Swindon, Abingdon, Moneyfields, they're not catching them. So we'll see, and we're just waiting to see who out of those two is going to prevail when they finally meet, because only then it seems, at the moment at least, will one of them stop being perfect, or maybe both of them stop being perfect, and one will get the advantage over the other. Other fixtures then coming up this weekend. We're going to start in the Northern Premier Division. We'll just run through all the fixtures. It's not quite a full programme, so we'll have to see on that. So Fylde against Forest, far bottom of the table. Forest second, pushing hard at the moment. You would expect Forest to win that, and it's another potential banana skin for Newcastle as they host Wolves. Now Wolves, of course, they haven't been in the best of it lately. However, you can't ever count Wolves out to pull off a little bit of a shock in a particular game. You know, they beat Reading, don't forget, in the FA Cup as well. Sadly, they all got food poisoning from it, as did the Reading players from the post-match meal. But yes, Wolves away at Newcastle, potential banana skin for Newcastle. Stourbridge against Halifax. Stourbridge 9 points clear of the relegation zone. Halifax just 3 points clear, but don't forget they have only played 8 games this season. Stourbridge with a win, you would say that would probably do it, and they would be absolutely fine. Halifax could really do with getting all 3 points, but they are away from home. West Brom against Derby, that is 9th against 6th. Again, West Brom could really do with the 3 points. A note on that game, it's a 3 o'clock start, not the usual 2 o'clock. 4 games as well in the Southern Premier Division. Cardiff City against Billericay Town. Cardiff staring over their shoulders at the bottom 2. Billericay Town in 8th. So a game between 2 teams in the bottom half of the table. Ipswich against Portsmouth after their meeting in the Cup, which went the way of Portsmouth after extra time. Can they do it in normal time in the league? Ipswich, really, if they have any hope at all of mounting any sort of challenge towards the back half of the season, they have to win this game. If they lose it, they're out of the race, in my opinion. London Bees against Oxford United. You would expect Oxford to pick the 3 points up there and keep the pressure on at the top. And Milton Keynes Dons against Plymouth Argyle is 6th against 9th. So no game for #United or Rugby Borough this weekend. So chance for Portsmouth to extend their gap at the top from just being on goal difference to 3 points with one of their 2 games in hand, and it is again one of the 2 games in hand for Oxford United as well, so they really need to try and close that gap. Division 1 Midlands then. Bournemouth St Michael's are due to be playing Sheffield. We'll see what happens with that game. Loughborough Lightning against Lincoln City. Lincoln down in 8th. Loughborough currently top of the table. Notts County against Northampton Town, 10th against 5th. And Leaford Athletic against Peterborough United is 12th against 4th. So very much at the moment, you've got 1st coming up against 8th. You've got 2nd against 11th. You've got 4th against 12th. You've got 5th against 10th. It's very much a top half, bottom half weekend in Division 1 Midlands. Division 1 North, just the 4 games. Chester Street Town against Leeds United. Durham Sestra take on Barnsley. Norton Stockton Ancients take on Hull City. And York City face Middlesbrough. So Chester Street Town with one of their games in hand here against FC United of Manchester. They host 6th place Leeds United. Durham Sestra in 4th against Barnsley in 1st. Durham have really in the last few weeks kind of started to climb the table significantly. 3 wins in 3 in January, if I remember correctly. So they've pulled themselves after a difficult start back into the periphery of the conversation, shall we say. But a win against Barnsley would do them a world of good. Norton Stockton Ancients down in 9th for hosting Hull City, so it could be a tough one for them. Hull trying to keep that pressure on Barnsley as well. And York City against Middlesbrough, that's 10th against 2nd. So the top 4 all in action this weekend in Division 1 North. 2 of them against each other. So they'll all be vying to change the narrative a little bit at the top of the Division 1 North table. As I said, games also for Norton Stockton Ancients, York City and Chester Street Town towards the bottom. Nothing for FC United of Manchester. Division 1 South East, there are just 3 games taking place this weekend. Wimbledon against Cambridge United is 1st against 6th. Haywards Heath Town against Actonians, 12th against 7th. And London Seawood hosting Norwich is 8th against 3rd. So these are, well, the game in hand for Wimbledon and one of the 2 games in hand for Norwich City over Worthing. So they will both be keen to put a little bit of distance between themselves and Worthing. Haywards Heath Town, there's no game for Cambridge City and there's no game for AFC Sudbury. What that means is that if Haywards Heath Town are able to get a victory against Actonians, who are in 7th, they would lift themselves out of the bottom 2. Now, Haywards Heath Town's only victory in the league this season came against Chesham United. They played Actonians. They haven't played Actonians yet. They've still got to play them twice. But Actonians, not a huge amount, given the game in hand as well, above Chesham United in the table. So it's not a given for Actonians. Good opportunity for Haywards Heath Town. This is their game in hand over Cambridge City. They'll be keen to get something from it. And Division 1 Southwest, finally, full programme in Division 1 Southwest, and the big one that everybody will be wanting to go and see. AFC Bournemouth against Exeter City, the two perfect teams in Division 1 Southwest will come up against each other on Sunday. We were denied this back in December when the weather claimed the pitch, and finally we are going to get this game between these two powerhouses of Division 1 Southwest this season and see who will come out on top. Elsewhere, Abingdon United against Moneyfields, 4th versus 5th. It'll be a tight game there. Bridgewater United against Keynsham Town is 7th against 6th. Portishead against Maidenhead United is 8th against 9th. So we've got the top two playing each other. So 1 and 2 are playing each other. 4 and 5 playing each other. 6 and 7 playing each other. 8 and 9 playing each other. Chelsea against Swindon Town is 12th against 3rd. And Torquay United against Southampton Women's is 11th against 10th. So of the 6 games that are taking place in Division 1 Southwest this weekend, 5 of the 6 have teams playing somebody who is right next to them in the table. So could be 5 0-0 draws. We'll see. I doubt it. As particularly I think Exeter City Bournemouth will have some goals, but expect to see quite a few draws perhaps in Division 1 Southwest this coming weekend with a fixture programme that looks like that. So that, as we just tick up to the 45-minute mark of this week's show, we'll do it for this week's Women's Football Chat. So next week, who will come out on top in that Division 1 Southwest game? What's the top of the Northern Premier Division going to look like? So many other questions. And as I said at the start of the show, so many stories are going to kind of reveal themselves in the second half of this season. The run-ins, of course, will be interesting to look at. We'll start doing that when we get to kind of the towards the back end of March. Now we're in February. It suddenly feels an awful lot closer, but there is plenty to be decided between now and then. As always, thank you for your support of the Women's Football Chat. I'll be back next Thursday at 6 p.m. bringing you the very latest from the 3rd and 4th tiers of women's football here in England. This is the show, of course, dedicated to the FA Women's National League. Thank you very much for watching and or listening to this week's episode of the Women's Football Chat, and goodbye.